Wood.
Transfer.
Wood transfer. Hey adventurers, it's Rachel and welcome back to Looking for Adventure Art, and today we are doing something super easy and fun, which is wood transfers. Now, way back when, actually one of you guys, Morgan, had commented about asking to put photos onto wood. And so I decided to make a tutorial for you guys and kind of show you a bunch of different options, because I went through a lot of videos and there wasn't really one single video that kind of showed everything. So I tried my best to kind of show you everything. I'm going to show you and walk you through some of the steps. The steps are all the same for all the different variations. And then at the very end, I'm going to show you side-by-side photos and talk about some tips and tricks which will help you guys get the best results possible. Let's get started. To get started, I am just using a gray wood stain. I picked this up at Joann's. You can pick it up at Home Depot. And I am just using a foam brush and rubbing that all over, and I'll let it sit for a few minutes and then I'll rub it off with a cloth, and you can see it's got some of the cool texture to it. And then I'm just going to be taking a gloss gel. You can use a matte, but I just had gloss on hand. This is a Liquitex brand because I don't use it very often, and Mod Podge for this project. So I'm just going to adhere it all over. You want a nice thin coat, as even as you possibly can, and then you're going to take your photo and you're going to just put it on there and wait 24 hours for it to dry. You want to make sure you press all the air bubbles out of it and then set it aside for 24 hours. So now that I set it aside, I'm taking a damp paper towel and I am just totally soaking the paper. I know that some people say not to do this, that it's more likely to make the photo tear, but I actually found that if I soaked the paper, it was easier to get all the paper off the first time without having a haze around it, and that I tore the photo less. So trial and error, I guess it depends on, how humid it is, or how much pressure you're applying, but at least this is the way that it worked for me personally. I did want to mention, as I am nicely, very gently rubbing this extra paper off with a paper towel, that you do want to make sure that your photo is printed in reverse and that it is on a thin piece of paper, along with it being laser jet. You do not want an inkjet, so go to Kinko's unless you have one at home and have them laser print it on one of the thinnest pieces of paper and make sure that your photo is in reverse. So that is really, really important. But now I'm just taking my Mod Podge with another foam brush and I'm just doing a really thin coat, and I'm going to set that aside to dry. So for the second block of wood, I wanted to try putting on the stain after I put on the photo, and I also wanted to show you what natural wood looked like instead of having the stain underneath the photo. So I'm just, again, taking that 3D gel and just putting a thin layer over it, making sure there's no streaks and it's all even, and then I am placing that photo down onto it. And I found that using either a squeegee or a credit card or something like that seemed to work a lot better at getting all the air bubbles out. And then after I was done, I set it aside to dry for 24 hours. So once again, I am taking that damp paper towel and I am just completely soaking the paper till I can start to see our faces, and then I set it aside to dry, or to let the water soak in for about 5 minutes. And I'm just kind of then taking my fingers and rubbing on it a little bit, trying to get some of that paper off. But I did find that using the paper towel was just much more efficient. I think it's just softer. I know some people like to use their fingers because they can just feel how much pressure they're applying, but I found that using the paper towel just gently rolled all of that wet extra paper on top away, and as long as I kept rotating the paper towel, it didn't seem to cause a lot of tearing with the actual image itself. If I didn't rotate the paper towel, so I was getting all of the buildup from the little paper pieces and the paper towel tearing, I had a problem. But just rotate your paper towel, that's all I can tell you. And then once again, put a nice thin coat of Mod Podge on, as thin as you possibly can. I did a much better job with the Mod Podge on this one than I did on the first one, because the first one I still could see some streaks in it. So now putting on the wood stain, I tried very, very, very carefully to kind of go all the way up to the edges and go all the way around, and then also fill in that top part where the photo doesn't completely fill out. However, I found that doing it after I put on the photo was just a big ginormous mess. It was such a pain in the butt, especially when I was trying to rub off the stain a few minutes later. It got on the photo. It was just a nightmare, so I ended up kind of just trying to put some wood stain along the edges of the photo and blend it in. It was a total mess, so I do not recommend doing this method if you can avoid it. But I did use the gray wood stain in particular for a specific kind of technique that I will show you in the next clip, but you can use any color wood stain that you want. So this is the backside of my dad's piece that I had made for Father's Day, and I am just putting on a really cute quote. I did reverse the words because I didn't want it backwards, and I also found that putting on the gel worked a lot better putting it on the paper than putting it on the wood itself, especially if you have a small piece or an odd shape that does not go all the way to the edges. So I let that sit for 24 hours and then I decided to rub it off, and it looks great. I absolutely love it. I once again make sure that I put Mod Podge all over it, seal it all in, all that good stuff. It doesn't take too long for the Mod Podge to dry, so I did end up, for all of these projects, just so you know, I went around all of the edges and the sides, even the part that did not have the photo on it. That's the front of it, super cute. And then I took just a random stencil from Prima, and I decided to use some Rub and Buff, because why not? I love Rub and Buff. I don't know about you guys, I try and use it in any project I can. And I just decided to put some Rub and Buff through this stencil. This is very much kind of my dad's sort of personality. He loves that kind of pattern and he loves gold, so I use the antique gold Rub and Buff, and I just kind of tried to fade it out and just put it on the edges and sort of frame up that quote that I had for Father's Day, and I think that it came out great. And once that was dry, I went back in and I just buffed it up and shined it up, and it looks great. Now that you guys have seen the step-by-step of kind of how to do the wood transfer, all the steps are the same no matter which method you decide to use, but I did want to show you a side-by-side comparison of some other variations that I did. I didn't want to bore you by just being super repetitive in the video, but I figured I'd talk you through it now. The first two transfers were this one and this one, which you did see in the video, and just like I had stated in the video, this has got the gray wood stain behind it, which I do think is really great, because if I hadn't done it, I would have had a lot of awkward space in here, which probably would not have been very pretty. And then this one was just the natural wood behind it, which kind of made everything look a little yellowy. So I wasn't really satisfied with either of these, and I had seen a really cool tutorial, which is why I picked the gray stain instead of a regular dark wood stain, because what they did was they took some chalk paint, so I got some white chalk paint, and they kind of did a light distress all over it. So for this one, I did a couple of things. I tore the edges to kind of give it a more natural look, along with giving it a nice blend out and kind of just a fun sort of vintagey feel. But I did use a light wash of the white chalk paint all over this, and I think that this really helped the camera pop. So I will do a side-by-side here and there, but I think overall that this looks a lot better than this one. Both are great, but I can actually see us, and I really like the torn edges. For this one, I decided on the back instead to just do straight white and see if there was any difference between having a gray stain underneath it, or if the white would really help brighten it up. So I did find that the white was really great, but it didn't, to me, make a huge difference between having the gray wash in the background and the solid white. So I actually prefer the gray wash. I think it gives a little more distressed feel and a little more vintage and kind of an old school. I really prefer this one to this one, but it is personal preference. But I think that the white chalk paint helps a lot. The last one is the one that you also saw in the video, which is the one that I made for my dad for Father's Day. So I do not have it with me because I am filming this part after Father's Day, even though I had filmed these all beforehand. But I did basically the same process of putting the gray wood stain all over it, and then I distressed with the white paint. But I also went in with a rag and I kind of made some scratch marks into the white paint, so it really looked kind of old and weathered and really cool. But what I loved about that was on the back and getting to do the cute little quote and the letters and everything like that. So that was kind of my overall favorite out of doing all of these. So after experimenting with these four, I went ahead and I did my Father's Day present, and I think it was great. Now time for some tips and tricks to help you guys get the best results possible. The first tip that I have for you guys is if you happen to be using a photo that is smaller than your area, or if you happen to be kind of tearing the edges of it, I found that putting the 3D gel onto the photo itself before transferring was probably the most effective method, because in my case I was using a gloss gel and you could see a little bit of the glossy variation. That's not a problem if you happen to be using a gloss Mod Podge. However, if you want to use one of the other different Mod Podges that are available, like an antique finish or a matte finish, that might be a little bit of a problem. But I didn't find it too much of a problem. It's just you can feel the texture difference in it. The second thing that I wanted to say is I do think that it is really important for it to dry for about 24 hours, but I was able to do some of these in 12. However, they did not adhere as well. So for this one, I think I waited about 18 hours, and the tears in it were for a couple reasons. One was because I don't think I waited the 24 hours that were necessary, and two, I had over soaked the paper a little bit. My second tip for you guys is when you are getting ready to kind of soak the paper and gently rub it off to reveal your image, you want to make sure that, I find initially soaking the paper helps a lot, and you don't want it too terribly dry, but if it starts to get oversaturated, it will start to peel up too much. I also found that using a paper towel when I was rubbing it off was a lot more helpful. Just make sure to constantly be rotating your paper towel, because it will start to collect all of the paper pieces along with starting to kind of tear up. So make sure that you definitely rotate your paper towel as often as you possibly can. But I found that I got a better result using a paper towel than I did using my fingers. I found when I used my fingers, as much as I could feel the pressure, I did notice that that is when I started to have some problems. I'm not quite sure what happened here, but I think it was a air bubble, because when I squeegeed everything out to try and make sure there were no air bubbles, I did get two. But all of these scratches were from putting too much pressure. So definitely take your time and go slow. The next thing that I wanted to say, and I don't think you guys will have any problems with it, I think it was just because I happen to be making multiples of these, but when I was storing them and when I was transporting them, I had them stacked on top of each other. And so for this image in particular, and one spot in my dad's image, which you will see in the final photos, it had actually gotten just a little scarred up. Now that's not because I had pressed too hard and took off the photo. It's because I stacked them on top of each other, and that this glossy Mod Podge finish makes them like cling together and adhere. I don't know, but don't do that. Do not stack these on top of each other. So that is my big word of caution to you guys. That is it for our tips and tricks. I hope that this was really helpful and informative to you guys, and that you could see a lot of variation so you can make the best choice possible when making gifts for yourself or for friends or for family or whoever you want to make this for. But now it is time for my favorite part of the video, which is our question of the day. So my question of the day to you guys is, which of these variations are you most likely to try? I'd love to know which one was your favorite, so let me know in the comments down below. And don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to the channel for all the daily updates. And if you happen to make this look or any of the other looks on my channel, feel free to Instagram me or Facebook me or email me or Twitter me or whatever kind of social media-ness that you guys do. I want to see it. Don't forget, every day is a new adventure, so come back next time for a new adventure with us. Wood.
Transfer.
I messed that up. Wood. I thought you were gonna say it. For this one, that was kind of my overall feel, which was also incredibly effective. What is wrong with my language sometimes?